Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Captain C.A. Richardson here for FlatsClass University. Today I'm going to share with you the top 4 mistakes that inshore anglers make every spring. In fact, a lot of it has to do with changing conditions. And today is a perfect example of that. So now that spring is here, let's run on down to the studio here and we're going to break it down. Let's go. Come on. Okay, like I was saying outside, things are changing. They're changing rapidly. We had a huge weather change from the end of last week going through this weekend where I happened to be lucky enough or fortunate enough to go to the Gator Nationals to where we are today. You know, we had a big front drop down from the Midwest, and even though it is mid-March and many of us are getting used to wearing short sleeves again, my azaleas are blooming outside and there's plenty of pollen, as you can hear in my voice right now, in the air, we still have these fronts, these late season fronts that pick up in wind, drop air temperature. Tomorrow I'll be in a jacket and I'll be bundled up when I go to the boat ramp in Old Homosassa. So it's going to change the fish. And the one thing you have to keep in mind when you're fishing in the spring is change is the only thing that you can count on. So here is mistake number 1. Because things seem as if we're going to be fishing like summer-like conditions because we have these big warm-ups and then they last for a little bit of time, then we get a cool down. Many of us are throwing lures that are too big. You do not want to color outside the lines this time of year. No. You want to throw the lures, the size lures that these predator fish are expecting. This time of year, much of it in the Gulf Coast and even up the Atlantic seaboard, a lot of the bait fish size is 2.5 to 4 inches long. That's white bait, sardines, threadfin, menhaden, even mullet, finger mullet. They're all small. This is about as small as it is coming out of winter. So a lot of your lure selection needs to be in that nominal size, that 2.5 to 4 inch size. So the only exception to that would be those of us that are targeting the big gator, the big sow female trout that are up skinny. Now those fish are looking for a big meal. They're looking for a big gliding, jerk shad or Paul Brown lure because they're looking for one protein source for sustenance. Evidently, spawning is very tiring and you need to eat a lot. I don't know, just a rumor. Okay, so here's what I recommend throwing to accommodate the size issue. I would throw suspenders. Mirrodines, Mirrolure makes a lot of them. Mirrodine XLs, you could throw Catch Juniors, Catch 2000s, you could throw Mirrominnows. There's just a laundry list of plugs that fit that size that are ideally made for springtime fishing. In fact, I always say that when spring comes, well, that's Mirrolure season for sure, especially for those of us that love to catch speckled trout and redfish. And some of us that are fortunate enough to live in warmer climates, even snook. Now, some other lures that are going to work exceptionally well this time of year are going to be your stick style baits like trout tricks, jerk shads, especially the 4-inch variety. But, again, if you're targeting the big gator trout, you could go to 5-inch baits. Any bottom bouncing lure that is moved at a slow, patient pace where you're making intermittent contact and stopping is going to be a good choice too. So that could be bucktail jigs, a number of lures. The number one thing you want to think of is I want to keep my lure in the strike zone as long as possible, and I want to choose the right size lure that appeals to most of these fish. The number 2 issue is lure speed. The tempo of the lure that you're working, you're probably working it too fast. That's right. I know things are warming up, and I know you don't want to crawl them the way that you did in December and January and most of February. Yet, you still have to work them at a pace where they're going to want to catch them. You got to keep this in mind about springtime. Springtime, not only are these conditions always changing, okay, but they're the most ideal time. That our water right now, most of our water levels in many places are low this time of year. We don't have those big summer tides yet. So fish are a little bit more concentrated. That means that tide height is a little bit lower. It's also, we haven't had a lot of rainfall. So with less rainfall, the water clarity is very clear. In fact, almost as clear as it was in the wintertime. Water temperatures are still cold, so that doesn't let a little algae grow yet or anything like that. So we have fish that are very wary, they're concentrated, and you'll get busted, trust me. So like I said in problem number 1, the lures are too big. Because conditions are ideal, you're going to have to make everything move a little slower. You want those suspending baits that go then, or they're touching bottom and stopping, touching bottom and stopping. Maybe swim a little bit, then fall again. They have to appear easy prey to the predator. If they're not easy, all you'll do is spook them. You don't want some loud flashing bait going through there, so you can't be darting a Mirrolure and making it look like a butterfly coming through a clear water zone that's super shallow with a bunch of redfish in it, because all you're gonna do is just see wakes going away in every direction. You can't do that. Same thing with snook. Same thing with the big trout. It has to be slow and calculated. More rod movement, less reeling. You're gonna have these higher barometer days where it's a bluebird sky and the fish are gonna sit really tight to the cover, to the grass, to the structure, the potholes, the oyster bars. They're not roaming around like they do in the summertime, where you can throw a paddle tail and just have that thing washing through there, or a big swim bait with a wedge tail throwing a signature. Those things do not work as well. I'm not saying they don't work at all. I'm just saying they do not work as well. Suspenders are still going to be your friend this time of year. Slow walk topwaters that stop, and then you pick the pace up and then stop. Those are going to work better. Bottom, bouncing, all the stuff I just mentioned because they were too big applies because you're working the lures too fast. Those are the first two. But number 3 and number 4 are even more important than these two. If there was ever a time that stealth really mattered, it's in the springtime. Just as much as it does in the wintertime. But in the wintertime, you're throwing such tiny little baits and fish are trapped in holes or deeper water. This is a period in the fish's life cycle and their seasonal migration where they're moving around a lot. One day they're here, one day they're over there. And there's a lot of things that affect that. What you have to do is minimize your footprint to those fish. So here are a few tips that I use. I move very calculated, very slow. I realize that a lot of these fish are going to be sitting down in cover or against structure, and I'm going to have to bring or approach the lure into their area in the direction that they expect, because lots of times I don't have those giant mullet schools around, or I don't have a lot of what I would call crowd noise from other fish. So I'm going to have to make those casts nice and clean and bring them in the direction that they expect. So that's with the tide. And many times the wind will be so strong, I'll bring it with the wind instead. That's very important. Another thing I like to do is I do not like to backlight myself. Yes, it is much easier for us as inshore anglers to see where we want to cast to with the sun behind us. But it doesn't matter what you wear. I don't care what you wear. White, tan, light blue, all these things that are costing you $75 for a shirt, you look like this hat. You look like a dark shadow to a fish if the sun is behind you. You want the sun over here to your left or over here to your right. Cheat it one way or the other and light yourself up, because at that point, well, you will be less obvious. You want to minimize your movements on the boat. You want to move that trolling motor as slow as you can, and you want to stop often to make casts. Some of us and a lot of successful Texas anglers, they literally wade this time of year because it is the right time of the year to be wade fishing. That way you've got more control over your lure. Your profile is minimized. This is the time of year you stay on the deck. You use lighter lines. I use much thinner lines, braids that are in the micro braid level. I think micro braids are perfect. They're quieter. I use longer leaders this time of year. And I use fluorocarbon leaders. I think fluorocarbon is harder for the fish to see, for one, and a lot of that has to do with not only are they so clean, but they're thinner than their cousins, the monofilament leaders. Plus, they transmit sensitivity much better. And because I'm using suspending baits where I need to feel that tap, or bottom feeling baits where I need to know where I'm at, fluorocarbon makes sense. Now let's talk about the last mistake, number 4. This one's going to get you thinking. That is, you must fish in the moment. That's right. The one thing you're going to count on during springtime is change. It's the only pattern that holds up every day. It's changing. It's constantly changing. And that's because of these late season fronts like I'm dealing with right now. It's also because the bait fish are just starting to show up, and that migration moves around quite a bit based off wind and tide and water temperature. So my fish might be in the mouth of this creek this day, and then they might be over there 1,000, 1,500 yards tomorrow. So you cannot fall prey to chasing yesterday's fish, yesterday's dock talk, hot bite from your buddy. All of that stuff will burn you this time of year. Never chase a bite. Look, fish the moment. Think about it now. This is what I'm telling you. React to what you see. What are you seeing in the water? Have you gone down 1,500, 2,000 yards of shoreline and not seen anything? You know what that should trigger in your thought process? I'm in the wrong spot. I'm not seeing what I should be seeing. Move out of that 1.5 to 2 foot of water. Move to the next edge where it's 3 to 4 foot of water. Start looking there. Or better yet, start looking for some isolated structure like an island that's away from the bank, or maybe a limestone ridge or oyster bar that's out there, or maybe a deeper bowl that has a different type of look. Look for something different, something unique. That is what will pay off during these times of transition, because these fish are just, sometimes they'll move further into the creek because we had a late front. Sometimes they'll bounce out. Sometimes they'll go way out if we have several days of warm weather. So they're always moving around. And if you're following that pattern that you had last fall, well, I caught them over there on that point really good in November, and this is about the same thing. It's not the same thing. It is not the same thing. I mean, I've had guys tell me stuff when I left the ramp. Because, yeah, yesterday we were killing them there at Mendit Key. Go to Mendit Key, man. You're going to catch some nice fish. You'll go there and there won't be a damn thing there. I'm telling you. And it's not because they're leading you astray. It's just because the stuff moves that much just overnight. It really honestly does. And these winds, like we have a lot of wind right now, they will either bring too much water in and it'll shift my bite tomorrow, or it'll swap around from the east and blow it all out. And then those fish will have to be either hundreds of yards to the outside of that, or maybe they go back inside where there's some deeper water. What I'm telling you is it changes, and it changes all the time, every day. Fish the moment. That is mistake number 4. So in review, don't make the mistake of fishing lures that are too big. Don't make the mistake this spring of fishing a tempo that is too fast like summertime. Don't do it. Think in your head. Be calculated. Be slow. Think about your footprint to those fish, because there's lower water this time of year. There's clearer water. There's bluer skies. There's more barometric pressure. These fish are aware of everything that's going on. Think about your approach. Stealth, stealth, stealth. That might be everything from longer casts to just moving slower to playing the game with wind and tide. Think about all that stuff. And then lastly, fish the moment. Don't fish old news. Don't think about what you did last year. Oh, I've got, 18 waypoints in this quadrant here. One of them's going to pay off. Sure they will, but do you got enough time? Do you have enough time to fish 18 waypoints? Because you got to move slow this time of year. You don't have all that water. You don't have that stained look in the water. You don't have all the puffy clouds and the gray afternoon thunderstorms. You don't have the sea breeze. You don't have any of those advantages yet. So what I'm telling you is, be more calculated this spring if you're throwing artificials, and you'll catch more fish. If this information helped you out or got the wheels turning in your head, and they're going to put more fish in your boat because now you're a little bit more confident, please consider giving us a thumbs up and smash that subscription button. I would love to have you right here in my virtual classroom each and every day, because we do a video here every day. And if you think that we go in depth here, you should see what we do over here at FlatsClassUniversity.com. My students learn the finer points of inshore fishing, the subtle nuances that are the details that make them a much better angling group. If you're interested in that, please come over and join me there. Until next time, I'll catch you guys in the next video.